On this episode of Game Shack, I take a look at a reimagining of an old tabletop classic, the Neon Electronic Arcade Pinball game, coming up next. Hey everybody, it's JDV here for EvilGeniusEntertainment.com. Thanks to everybody for stopping back into the Game Shack, and thanks to everybody who's been watching and commenting on our prior videos. It really does mean a lot to us. We appreciate all the new people stopping by. Please feel free to comment. I really do enjoy interacting with people who watch the videos and trying not to make too much of a out of myself. All right, I'm calling February the month of pinball, both because the arcade one-ups delivery, limited though it may be, of the Star Wars virtual pinball game, and the overall interest in virtual pinball, which seems to be exploding right now, as I think At Games just did a killer business on Sunday as I record this with pre-orders for Wave 4 of their machine. The Toy Shock Waves 1 and 2 have sold out, and we're waiting for Wave 3 to be released, hopefully sometime this spring. And just in general, there's a keen interest in pinball. Now, to get a real pinball game is cost prohibitive. I think the cheapest one I've been able to find is $5,000 new, and that's, very simple. $5,000 is obviously a boatload of money, and these machines are not only very large and expensive, but they're also expensive and hard to take care of. These real pinball games are notoriously sensitive for breaking down and parts breaking and lights going out and all kinds of things like that. So these virtual pinball games have been a kind of a godsend to try to replicate that experience. But of course, even the best virtual pinball game, even the 4K, mega ones, are still ultimately video games. So I wanted to take a look at the real pinball games that you could actually get into your home that wouldn't cost a mint and wouldn't take up your entire house. And so I've really, at this point, only found 3. And you can see the reviews of them here. This is the Jack's 3/4 scale machine, which I think is the only real, again, pinball machine that you can get in that size for under $5,000, and you can get it for about $100 right now from QVC. I actually really do like that one. It's a little finicky, and you do have to be willing to work with it. But once you get it running, it is a pretty fun machine. And I'll also have a video on how you can mod or kind of combine 2 machines into one to really have a real pinball experience. I also review the New Golden Era tabletop pinball game, which of the 3 pinball games I review is the simplest. It has very basic scoring, very basic sound effects. But it's still a fun game. You can definitely play it for 15-minute segments and not be too bored. And because it is so simple, I expect it to have a lot of longevity. So it's a good thing to be able to kind of put on in a closet for a rainy day or something. The one I'm going to review today is a clone or remaking or imagining of an old Tomy tabletop pinball game. I think they might have branded it as the Atomic Era pinball game, but it's almost exactly identical except for the now digital scoring, and just the playfield looks different, but the mechanics of the game are all almost exactly the same. Speaking of which, this game is different than the other 2 pinball games I review in that there are 5 bumpers. These all kick and react to the ball and kind of move the way you'd want or expect a real pinball game to react to a real arcade pinball game. So that is really cool, and that is why I really wanted to pick this game up. I wanted to see how much of a difference there was. Now, the Jack's 3/4 scale has a spinny flipper type thing that kicks the ball all around, which does do some really cool things. And I've actually put another one into my modded machine, and with 2 of them, you can really have some good, exciting pinball action. But this is the only one out of the box that has bumpers that will actually kick the ball around. And so that is really cool. The other really cool thing about this machine is the digital backboard and scoring. It will remember your high score, which is super awesome. And you can have it turned off for weeks, as I've done from time to time, and it'll still remember your high score. So I think that's a really cool feature. It has a very bright, vibrant red LED background. The score itself is variable, so it's not always just 5 or 10 points. The scoring will change depending on the combination of flippers you hit, whether or not you go down this, these two kind of backboard thingies here right now. The music is very interesting. It has different music to start the game. It has different music during the game. It'll have a musical cue every time you hit 500 points, which is pretty good. So at 500, 1,000, I'd say 1,500, but I haven't gotten to 1,500. I'll talk a little bit about the difficulty game in a second. It has LED lights that light up here, and just overall out of the box, it delivers probably the best or biggest wow factor, at least in terms of what the game actually can do in terms of the lights, the sound effects, the music, and the bumper play. All make this a very out of the box, like, wow, I mean, that's a real pinball game. It's about the same size as the New Golden Era pinball game, although the ball on this game, you only get one ball. You get 3 on the other tabletop version, and you only get 1 on the jacks. So that's about right. You only get 1 ball, which is cleverly hidden kind of in the left part here, which you can, you pull that down, the ball is released. So it's always good when there's a way to hold the ball. So there's no kind of multi-ball or anything like that. Kind of like in the other tabletop game, there are some rubber bands on either side of the playfield that really don't do a whole lot. They just, I mean, I guess they're better than nothing, but they really don't affect the gameplay very much. But overall, other than the fact that you have to put the stickers on, which is kind of a pain in the butt, but you really have to do it, because if you don't do it, it's very hard to figure out where the on-off button is and the reset button. I mean, it took me quite a while to figure out where those were at, and the book doesn't help you. Once you put the stickers on, then it kind of, oh, there it is, because you can see it. But if you try to play the game without putting the stickers on, it can be a little confusing. But just out of the box, this thing is going to deliver you probably the closest thing that you think of in terms of pinball, just because of all the multitude of sound effects, the music, the scoring, and the bumper play. So in that regard, it is all to the good, and it is quite small. So it is a true tabletop pinball. It seems very robust. The battery life has been good, even though you have a lot of movement here. It doesn't die right away, and in fact, I'm still on my first set of batteries. So all of that seems good. I've read reviews of some of the older Tomy units, you know, that are for sale on eBay and Craigslist and things, and a lot of them still work. So I'm hoping that the bumpers will stay, you know, good throughout the life of this unit. So those are a lot of good positives. What are some negatives? Well, there are some negatives, and besides this, you know, obviously if you want a bigger unit, this small little guy is not going to be for you. Look at that Jack's 3/4 scale unit pinball game, which is, I mean, to me, it is the funner game just because the size of the game is closer to a real pinball game. The other thing about this game is that it is actually very hard. The ball tends to want to go straight down, and even though it does have these things where it kicks around, it doesn't kick the ball around quite as vigorously as you would want it to. And I think that might be because both the design of the bumpers, and also because I think the ball might be just a tad too large. I mean, you want to have a bigger ball just because it's closer to a real pinball game or an arcade pinball game. But if it's too large, the mechanics of the game have a hard time kicking the ball around. Now, the ball in this game is much larger than the one in the other tabletop game, which has 3 little small, almost like BB style pinballs. But I wonder if the ball might be just a scooch too big in this, because even though it has 5 reactive bumpers, the playfield is kind of dead. The ball just wants to go straight up and down. It doesn't kick the ball around enough to really go zig-zagging around. It just doesn't. You want it to, but it doesn't. It's kind of an oddly difficult game, and one where I guess they call it having a dead pinball field, where there isn't as much excitement as you'd expect depending on the design. And it's kind of disappointing that there isn't more reaction in the game. The biggest negative, besides a playfield that is a little dead or very kind of straight up and down, is you cannot control the volume of the game. Unlike the Jack's 3/4 scale game where you can turn the volume all the way down so you don't hear any music or sounds, you cannot adjust the volume on that at all. And because these reactive bumpers are always on, they're making a noise and shaking, that makes a boatload of noise too. So you definitely cannot play this game if you're trying to be quiet. Even though it is maybe a quarter of the size of the 3/4 size Jack scale, it makes as much noise, and really more noise, because you can't control the volume. So that is a really big negative. There's also one other very irritating thing about this game, which is when you hit start to start the game, if the ball isn't here all the way up to the countdown reaching 0 before you release it to shoot it, the playfield will stay dead and you won't be able to score. So it took me a while to figure that out. So, 3, 2, 1, okay, just shoot it up there before the clock hits 0. Nothing happens. Like, what the heck? Comes down here, I'm still not getting anything. Then I released it, then it triggered the game, and then all of this came to life. It's a little weird the way that worked. The spring is a little weak for kicking this thing up. You'll see sometimes you'll need 4 and 5 chances at doing it. Now the same thing happens on the Jacks, but that has a much longer travel length for the ball to go up, and the ball is much bigger in that game, even bigger than this. So I wish that they had kind of had a bigger spring, but mostly it's you look at all of this and the lights and the sound and a really sweet scoring backboard and all that, and you expect this thing to really dance around, and it doesn't. Now let's talk about cost, because part of my experience with this and the grade I'm going to give it is based on cost. I was able to buy this brand new at Urban Outfitters, of all places, for $10 plus $5 shipping. Immediately after that, they rose it to $20 plus $5 shipping. I don't know if it's still good. You can get this game right now on Amazon. I think it's like $40, maybe $50. So what's going to be my final grade on this? Well, if you can get this thing for, I'd say $30 or less, maybe $25, I'd give it a solid 3.5 stars. I can't quite get to 4 stars because I am a little disappointed on how it plays. Now, I will say this, my wife played it, and when I set it up for her, she hadn't seen it. I've been doing my reviews and whenever she wasn't around, and I had it on the table, and she turned it on, she's like, oh wow, this is super cool. My students are gonna love this. She's a teacher. She's like, they're gonna be able to earn, good behavior points so they can play this pinball game. Well, that's high praise, So I guess it depends on who you are. It is definitely an interesting game. It's a fun game, and it is a way to play real pinball for $50 or less. Okay, so that wraps up my review of this Neon Electronic Arcade Pinball from, I think it's Ambassador. Yeah, from Ambassador Holdings, all right? So, but I think most of the time you're going to see it listed as the Neon Electronic Arcade game. So if you're searching around on Google for it, that's what you'd want to look up. Real quick, it does come very attractively packaged. The box is very nice. So if you were thinking about giving this as a gift to a kid or a grandkid or something, I think it'd be very if they like pinball at all, I think they're going to enjoy this game. Okay, well, that wraps up this episode of Game Shack. Please give me a thumbs up if you like this content, and 2 thumbs down if you don't. Well, love each other, and until next time, I will see you in the Game Shack. Mwah!
sure to visit evilgeniusentertainment.com for exclusive content, swag, casting call news, and much, much more.